man lies on his stomach in the freezing mud, 55 feet below the earth. The limestone walls press tight against his chest. The space is no wider than a cheap pine coffin. He is inching forward in the dark. He pushes a glass kerosene lantern ahead of him. The air is thin. The lantern flame sputters. It starts to die. The man hurries. His boot slips. He kicks a loose 27-pound rock from the ceiling. It falls. It wedges hard against his left ankle, pinning his leg. A torrent of loose gravel crashes down in the black, burying him to the waist. The lantern shatters. The silence rushes in. The cold takes hold. He is trapped. The amber lamp is burning low. I know you are out there, waiting in the dark. The static hums through the wire. I'm looking at a ledger about a man swallowed by the earth, and the old ink keeps rubbing off on my hands. You cannot sleep. Neither can I. Sit with me a minute. We are going into the dark. You're listening to the Midnight Box. I'm Vesper Klein. Before we look at the dirt, let us understand the greed. In the early 1900s, central Kentucky was a battlefield. They called it the Cave Wars. Poor dirt farmers figured out that the ground beneath their feet was worth more than the crops they grew. Mammoth Cave was the king of the tourist trade. The owners fought bitter, dirty campaigns to drag tourists off the highway and down into their own dark holes. They sold the dark for $1 a head. Floyd Collins was a cave hunter. He had been crawling into the earth since he was 6 years old. In 1917, he found a massive cavern under his father's farm and called it Great Crystal Cave. But it was too far off the main road. The tourists passed him by. Floyd wanted a golden ticket. He wanted a cave right on the Cave City Highway. He found a crack in the ground on a neighbor's farm. They called it Sand Cave. It was January 30th, 1925. Floyd went down to widen the passages. He went down alone. When the rock fell and trapped his foot, Floyd was 150 feet from the surface. He screamed himself hoarse in the dark. He clawed at the limestone until his fingers were raw and bloody. The rock did not move. He lay there all night. The next day, a 17-year-old boy named Jewel Estes crawled into the narrow fissure. He heard Floyd calling out. He carried the word to the surface. Floyd's brother Homer went down. Homer squeezed through the mud. He brought Floyd a blanket. He fed him coffee and milk. He tried to pry the rock loose, but the passage was too tight. There was no leverage. The news spread. The locals gathered at the mouth of the cave, but nobody knew what to do. The rescue attempts were desperate and brutal. Lieutenant Robert Burden of the Louisville Fire Department went down. He strapped a heavy leather harness around Floyd's chest. The men on the surface pulled. They pulled until Floyd screamed in agony. They could drag him out, but they would tear his foot from his leg. They stopped. Then the press arrived. William Burke Miller was a 21-year-old reporter for the Louisville Courier-Journal. They called him Skeets because he was no bigger than a mosquito. Skeets was small enough to crawl down to Floyd. He didn't just ask questions. He brought a string of electric light bulbs wired to a generator on the surface and rested one on Floyd's chest to keep him warm. Skeets wrote down Floyd's words. He described the purple lips and the pale face. He sent the ink out over the telegraph wire. The story exploded. It became the the third biggest news event in the country, sitting right behind Charles Lindbergh. The city is a machine, but out in the country, the madness is a different breed. While a man was freezing to death in the mud, a grotesque carnival set up camp on the surface. By the second week of February, tens of thousands of people jammed the dirt roads to Cave City. They called it Carnival Sunday. The crowd topped 50,000. They came in motor cars from 20 different states. Vendors pitched tents. They sold 25-cent hamburgers, hot coffee, and bootleg moonshine. Men picked pockets. A local preacher held a church service for 20,000 worshipers right outside the cave. Old Lee Collins, Floyd's father, walked through the crowd. He quoted the Bible. He sold photographs of his dying son for $1 apiece. He handed out flyers telling the crowd to go visit his other property, Great Crystal Cave. Down in the dark, the ice melted. The heat from the light bulb and the breath of the rescuers thawed the frozen mud. The freezing water dripped onto Floyd's face. He lay in a puddle of ice water. He began to hallucinate. He dreamed of white chariots and hot food. On February 4th, the earth had enough. The unstable rock in the passage cracked. The ceiling slumped. A wall of stone and dirt collapsed between Floyd and the surface. He was sealed off. The men above could hear his voice, but they could no longer reach him. The state brought in the National Guard. They strung up barbed wire to hold back the screaming tourists. They brought in Henry Carmichael, a hard engineer. Carmichael knew the cave was too rotten to clear. He ordered his men to dig a straight, vertical shaft 55 feet down through the solid rock to reach Floyd from behind. But they couldn't use dynamite. The shock waves would drop the ceiling directly onto Floyd's head. They couldn't use pneumatic drills. They had to dig a hole 6 feet wide and 55 feet deep, using only pickaxes and hand shovels. The rain turned the dirt to heavy muck. The digging was agonizing. They cleared the rock at a rate of 2 feet an hour. The days dragged on. The crowds above ground drank a moonshine and watched the mud fly. Down below, Floyd Collins was trapped in the pitch black. The radio men rigged an amplifier to the copper wire of Floyd's light bulb. The machine crackled 20 times a minute. It was the sound of Floyd breathing. On February 11th, the light bulb went out. On February 13th, the diggers heard Floyd coughing, and then the silence returned. On Monday, February 16th, a miner broke through the bottom of the shaft and crawled into the cavern. He pointed his light. Floyd Collins was lying exactly where the rock had pinned him 17 days before. He was cold. He was dead. The doctors said he died of exposure and starvation 3 days earlier. The state looked at the crumbling rocks. They looked at the mud. They decided it was too dangerous to remove the heavy stone from Floyd's ankle. They abandoned the shaft. They sealed Sand Cave, leaving Floyd entombed in the earth. That should be the end of the ledger. A tragic death. A man swallowed by the dirt. But the greed never sleeps. Homer Collins was angry. He wanted his brother out of that hole. He hit the Chautauqua theater circuit. He gave speeches, showed slides, and earned $500 a week. In April 1925, he paid a crew to open the cave. They dragged his brother's decomposing body out of the dirt. They buried him under a stalagmite on the family farm. 2 years later, Lee Collins sold the farm and Great Crystal Cave to a dentist named Dr. Harry Thomas. The dentist paid $10,000, but he had a grim condition. He wanted Floyd. The law allowed it. They dug Floyd up again. They did cosmetic work on the rotting corpse, placed him in a glass-topped bronze coffin, and set him right in the middle of the tourist trail inside Crystal Cave. For years, you could pay a ticket and stare at the man who died in the dark. The tombstone read, "Greatest cave explorer ever known." But a dead man left in the open is a target. On a dark night in March 1929, someone broke into Crystal Cave. They stole the body right out of the glass box. The police brought in bloodhounds. They found the corpse wrapped in a gunny sack, thrown in the brush near the Green River. The thieves had tried to carry him away, but the body was heavy. They hacked off his injured left leg to lighten the load. The police put Floyd back in his glass box, minus the leg. The thieves were never caught. The leg was never found. It took until 1989 for the National Park Service to finally give him peace. They moved him to a quiet church cemetery. The city is a machine, but the earth is just a stone vault. We dig into the dirt looking for gold, looking for a dollar, looking for a way out. Sometimes the dirt bites back. Floyd Collins just wanted to make a living. He ended up as a sideshow attraction, bleeding out his last breaths, while a crowd of 50,000 ate hamburgers over his head. The ledger is heavy today. The ink rubs off on my fingers. You sit in your parlor tonight. You listen to the static on the radio. Maybe you have a basement. Maybe the floorboards feel solid. Check your foundation. Keep your windows cracked. The cold air is better than the tight dark. I'm going to finish this coffee. I'm going to watch the rain hit the glass. Keep your eyes open and your matches dry. Until next time, good night.